Welcome to Plastic Model Mojo, a podcast dedicated to scale modeling, as well as the news and events around the hobby. Let's join Mike and Kentucky Dave as they strive to be informative, entertaining, and help you keep your modeling mojo alive.
All right, folks, welcome to episode 132, our first feature episode of the new year. Happy New Year, Dave.
Happy New Year, Mike. How are you doing?
Well, I guess you might as well just give privacy to the wind. I'm nursing a kidney stone, Dave.
Yes, not fun. Not fun at all.
Oh.
I luckily have avoided those, and we know several people who suffer from them, and they're just not any fun.
Me too, and his name is my dad.
Yeah. So you came by it honestly.
I came by it honestly. I
It's
did.
good to know. Well, hopefully it won't move during the recording of this episode.
We should hope not.
Yep.
Well, Dave, that's not my model sphere, but what's up in yours?
Well, not terribly much. The last 2 weeks, I have gotten very little done. When I have gotten to the bench, I've been unmotivated. As you well know, and as others know, in the last 2 weeks, we've gotten hit by a couple of snowstorms. And unfortunately, you would think, oh, great, there's a foot of snow outside, just go down to the hobby room and model away. Well, that's not the way it works. You got to dig the cars out so everybody can get everywhere. And it just, then you're dealing with all the stuff, trying to make sure that everything gets done that needs to get done so that you don't have pipes freeze or stuff like that. So unfortunately, and part of it's motivation, I just have found myself not motivated particularly the last week. And so
We got to fix that.
yeah, I know. I've got to find my mojo. I need to borrow a cup of mojo from you because you apparently have mojo to spare. So what's up in your model sphere?
Well, other than riding the pain train since about last Sunday with this freaking kidney stone, I've been working on the new look that's kind of rolling out and kind of in tandem with the new website, which has not quite rolled out yet, but we were wanting to test the look of all our social media versus the links on the staging site we're using. So I went ahead and changed all the dojo, the PMM Facebook page, the Patreon page, and one other. What was it? Oh, the merchandise store.
Right.
So I created new banners for those. 3 of them look pretty good. One of the Facebook ones really dumbed down the image, so I'm going to go ask our design team for their raw high-res image for one of those line drawings we got on there. So it doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look great either. I'm not happy with it.
I'll be honest with you. I was a little worried you were getting lazy. You weren't doing so. Well, other than the stuff for Plastic Model Mojo, how's your model sphere been?
Well, that is the model sphere, man. That's modeling related, getting this show up to the next level.
Yeah.
I've also been thinking ahead as to what project, either current or not started yet, will take the forefront here once this float plane's done. We'll talk about that shortly. Yeah. So, I've been opening some kit boxes and rustling some parts and doing all that stuff we all like to do. When
there's nothing more
looking
fun
for something new, right?
Yeah, there's nothing more fun than opening up a model box and fondling the kit parts, man.
So I got ideas. We'll figure that out, but nothing new till I get one done.
I hear you. Well, you're close. We'll talk about that. So, Mike, we're recording our first official episode of 2025, first main episode. I'm assuming you've got a modeling fluid to go along with the first episode of 2025. What is it?
Well, Total Wine finally got some Russell's Reserve tenure back on the shelf, so I got one of those.
Oh, nice.
Now, it's a modest pour because while one might think that would alleviate some of the kidney stone pain, they got me on that Flomax crap, so
Yeah.
I don't need to further reduce my continency.
Gotcha. You would prefer not to wet yourself on air.
Or into bed.
Or in the bed. Yeah. The wife's going to object to that. So, Russell should get you
It's
through
good.
the episode.
I'll be good.
Yeah.
Well, what about you, my friend?
Well, normally you'd hear the sound of a beer opening, but I'm doing a bourbon.
Sounds like my microphone.
Yeah. Doing a bourbon this episode, thanks to a good modeling friend, Scott Skippy King, who came over and modeled on New Year's Day with me. Skippy brought a Christmas present, which was a bottle of Dareringer Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey from Rabbit Hole Distillery. And this is a bourbon that's finished in sherry casks. And so I've got I'm sitting here with my Plastic Model Mojo whiskey glass with an ice ball, a pour of the Rabbit Hole Dareringer, my new...
Dareringer or Dareringer?
It's Dareringer. Dareringer.
I'll have to look that word up.
It's not the gun. I'm not sure what it's named after. I'll have to read the label. I'm sure it tells me.
Okay.
But I've got my Plastic Model Mojo whiskey glass. I've got an ice ball. I've got some bourbon. I've got my model airplane maker keychain, and I'm ready to record.
Well, good, because we deferred the listener mail last episode there at the end of the year.
Yes.
And we gotten a few more. So this episode is going to be rather listener mail heavy.
All right.
But it's always fun.
Yes. We love these.
And I guess we just need to get into it because the first one's a really good one.
Dive in.
First up from the south of England, Mr. Eddie Turner. Eddie's enjoying the podcast. He says he's even joined his national IPMS in the UK and went to Scale Model World at Telford, which blew his mind. That's someplace we need to go to.
We need to. Yeah, you and I need to figure out how to do that.
And some other shows maybe over there, but
yeah,
that one's the easiest.
Yes.
Well, anyway, his question for the mailbag is, NASA has just chosen Plastic Model Mojo to be the first podcast recorded on the moon. However, they have left the sponsorship deal up to its astronauts, you and Dave. What model company would you entrust to build your lunar lander recording studio spaceship, and why? Bonus points if you can both agree on the same one. Well, I know who's building mine.
I know who I would choose.
Tamiya's building mine. It's going to have the fewest parts to break, and it's going to fit together and work.
Well, if I had to choose, the natural choice would actually be SpaceX.
It said model company.
I know.
No,
if I had to go with model company, I do agree that Tamiya is an excellent choice. The only thing that I can think of right now that might rival it would be Arma. But I think you're right. You can't beat Japanese engineering.
At least for model kits.
At least for model kits. Hey, they've got a great space program, too.
Oh, man. Up next, Dave, from the Netherlands.
Okay. We're getting international.
Lauren Steffers. So the first two are from outside the borders of the United States. Lawrence is 47, been modeling since he was 13. He's been a voluntary firefighter most of his life, and I think he's finally put that aside and doing more modeling now, a lot of 3D printed stuff. He's printing figures in all scales. It's really cool. He's actually interested in starting a podcast, I assume, in his native language. That might be a good idea. We can talk about that offline if he's interested. Something short, 20-minute stuff you can listen to while you're walking the dog. But he's just saying howdy and liking his 3D printer.
Well, you know what? We know, speaking of model airplane maker, he just got a 3D printer and has started playing with it. And, everybody I know who's gotten one they're really enjoying the experience. Now, the only downside is that can become a hobby in and of itself. But, you know, I fully support anybody out there, you know, who gets a 3D printer going in and experimenting, and you never know what you can come up with. You never know the need that you see that nobody else sees, that you may end up designing and printing something that just absolutely stuns the modeling world. So I'm happy to see more people doing it.
Up next, Dave, is Will Jordanger, and he's from Buckley, Washington, which is about 20 miles east of Tacoma.
Okay, we got somebody in the U.S. All right.
And he's been enjoying the laser cutter stuff because his father had a trophy and awards business and has been using one for a number of years. And they just started using it for structures for model railroads, HON and scale dioramas his dad does. And then he's been using it for background materials and base planks for his 1 to 144 scale aircraft. He says the main difference between a diode laser and a CO2 laser is the wavelength of light which it puts out. Mm-hmm. The CO2 offers a greater energy output, power output because of that, and that's why it can cut more stuff than the diode can. So there you go.
There you go. Well, I think I knew that was the distinction, but I'm glad to have somebody who knows confirm it. And you know that I guess this is we're starting 2025 as the year of technology and modeling. 3D printers, laser cutters. I predict that we're going to see exponential growth in both of those areas in the hobby this year.
You like the easy bets, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And if anyone's interested, he's using a program called FreeCAD for his major 2D and 3D designs. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it can do your 3D print stuff, and I guess can also put out a file that the image processor like CorelDRAW or something can use, and then port on over to the laser. So there you go. FreeCAD.
There you go.
Well, we missed Bruce McRae down in Murfreesboro. We didn't get to go down there.
I know.
And currently, Bruce is looking for his next round of travels with his wife, and they're looking at 4 shows, including the AMPS Nationals again. So maybe we'll get to see him come springtime.
That would be really great.
Well, he was at Murfreesboro, as he promised he would be.
Yeah.
And he won a $50 prize for the furthest traveled.
All right. I think that's a great idea.
It is, too. Second place went to a guy from Illinois who I bet thought he was a sure in for the prize until Bruce showed up. Oh,
but
man.
I would love to see more contests do stuff like that. You know, youngest modeler, oldest modeler, who came the farthest. Things like that, or, you know, those local variations where you see stuff like that at shows. I think that adds the color that makes a show different and enjoyable.
It is. And he's found something that makes our show more enjoyable, too.
Which is?
Remember, his wife's the technophile in his house. Right. And he's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
And on this recent trip, she introduced him to actually playing the thing over the car stereo.
Oh, good. Although that means she's got to listen too, so.
Well, but he says they'll pause and have a discussion about stuff and puts her 2 cents in. And apparently the dogs don't seem to want to be involved with it. But
it just goes to show the dogs have good sense.
And he says it's a ride to hear that other people also spend their time crawling around on the floor looking for model parts.
Oh, God, yes.
And he chuckles at our sometimes we have to push to make a deadline comment in one of the last episodes. Yeah. He thought that was cute because he spent an entire career working against deadlines that you can't move. You put in the midnight oil to get them done, and even under budget if possible. And then when it's all said and done, they cut the entire scene from the movie.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, we've had this one a little while. It came in a little after Thanksgiving. So, Bruce, I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving. I'm glad all your travels went safe, and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And hopefully we will see you in April or May, whenever that is.
April, I think.
Another one for the Netherlands, Dave.
All right.
It's from our friend Gus Guyer, and he says he wrote in about a year ago about his modeling mojo in fear of starting a special kit, which was the 100 scale, the 1/400 scale Heller aircraft carrier Carl Dorman.
I remember.
And he says that one's currently on the shelf of doom because connecting resin bits and bobs to a 1974 Heller kit is a bit challenging.
Challenging is the word you're looking for.
Putty, sand, prime again and again. He's used all types of cement and putties. He's found the right combination. He likes the VMS 5K CA resin.
Yep.
And an automotive putty.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Hobby, he's using the aqueous surfacer mixed with unicorn tears.
Oh, okay.
He's lost his mojo a little bit on the project. He stepped away from it. He's got the lower hull and flight decker ready for the next few steps, and he's been 3D printing Grumman trackers. Or buying, I don't know if he's been printing. He's been getting 3D printed Grumman trackers from Le Arsenal. It's a very nice 3D print company making these small-scale airplanes. And
yep.
That's the beauty of 3D print there. I guarantee you nobody would be chucking out 400 scale aircraft on the regular.
Yep.
If it weren't for 3D printing.
Yep.
Unless you really loved an old Heller aircraft carrier kit.
Yeah, that is. And the same thing with figures is, the ability to have a figure that's been done up in CAD that you can do 48 scale, 72nd scale, 35th scale, 32nd scale. That is one of the beauties of 3D printing.
Well, Gus, keep chugging along on that. You'll get it done. He says he's going to pick it back up again in 2025.
I'd like to see a Carl Dorman done.
Well, and I remember why we got some of these longish emails, because we asked folks to send in what they've been doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of them did, including Gus. 2024 was also the 80th anniversary of Operation Market Garden.
Yes, it was.
And he visited the Remembrance and airdropping with his 11-year-old son.
Oh, that would have been great.
And he's inspired to start a 35th scale Arnhem diorama using, some Red Devils and a Stug 3.
Yep.
There's quite a few images around their involvement there with Sturmgeschütz and the Red Devils.
And if you don't have the After the Battle book on Market Garden, you should get it. Well worth it.
Well, he picked up a ton of aftermarket at Scale Model Challenge for the DOSWorks kit, and he's looking forward to getting into that. And he's been watching Evan's videos to get brushed up on weathering.
Well, if you have any questions about Stugs, email Evan.
That's right. And his son's going crazy on all the 3D printed animal items at SMC, and now he's building a jungle diorama with all kinds of 3D printed animals and vegetation. So
cool.
Rubbed off on him.
That's great.
And for our Black Friday question, his local hobby shop had a 10% discount on airbrushes, and he picked up an H&S Evolution 2024
Good
CR
choice.
Plus, which is the one we've been test driving.
Yep.
And been real happy with that.
Good.
Gus, keep it up. Get back on your ship. Send us some pictures of it.
Yep.
Well, Steve Rui has written in again, and he's the person who wrote in, a couple episodes back about how to get motivated again. He was in a funk and lost his mojo, spinning his wheels, which is actually the email that our guest answered that got us to have him on the show.
Yep.
Well, Steve's got it back, Dave.
Great. That's good news.
And he's been working on a Kinetic CF 104.
Mm-hmm.
Canadian version of the Starfighter.
Yep.
He's got the Belcher Bits decal sheet, and it'll be a natural metal finish, so that's going to be sharp.
Yep. And Belcher Bits, those are great decals.
Well, he enjoys listening to the podcast on his long drives or when traveling in his Piper Cub airplane. So,
oh, nice.
There we go. Mojo in the air.
There you go.
Mark Doremus is back from his Asian travels.
Yep. He messaged us while he was traveling. It was really kind of neat to experience it along with him.
Well, he summarized all that in a Word document, and I'm not going to get into that with this email reading. We're glad you're home, Mark, and safe, and I'm sure you'll be heading somewhere else before too long. You seem to travel a lot.
Yep.
But once we get the website up and going, I got a plan for his summary. So
good.
Folks will be able to see that eventually. John Lees is next, and we met John at the MMSI show.
Mm-hmm.
And he sent me a link. He sent me a link to it's a Japanese float plane, a rather obscure one, like a pre-war thing. 72nd scale resin kit. And he knew this company because he was clearing out his brother's estate.
Yep.
in many cases giving away some of these kits I'm about to mention. It's Chirosi's the brand. There's more to the name than that.
Chirozzi Model Broad.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, they do make some interesting things. They also make some interesting 35th scale things.
Yep, and some of their stuff is really, really nice.
In fact, they had a Soviet World War II pre-war, like 85 millimeter anti-aircraft gun that I was hot to get until Trumpeter released their two in plastic. So
yeah,
I was almost there. But yeah, that plane he sent me is kind of being used in the early stages of their involvement in China and Southeast Asia.
Which aircraft?
I can't remember. It's a little bitty biplane, float plane.
Okay, you'll have to send me.
I will. I'll send that to you. Up next, Martin Pieta. And he says maybe it's just Dave that doesn't like stouts, but here's a pretty damn amazing one from Three Floyds. The Marshmallow Hanji.
Really?
Yep. And he sent a picture of the label, and he's got another one too. It's called Kentucky Brunch, and it's one that's been finished in whiskey barrels.
Right.
I've not had that one. It's a Toppling Goliath Brewing Company on that one for the Kentucky Brunch.
You know what? I am not a stout fan, but if it's a Three Floyds product, I'm willing to try any Three Floyds product. The only thing I've not liked of theirs is their Scotch Ale, Robert the Bruce. But, they just do such good stuff. So I may look out for that, and I may sample it.
Well, you weren't a hops guy till about 2020.
Yeah, that's true. That is absolutely true. My palate has evolved.
Up next from West Alexandria, Ohio is Greg Williams, and he sends a rather succinct email that hits all his high points for the last year.
Yeah.
His best all-around experience and fun build was a 48 scale T-34-85 they did for the Posse 100 episode 48 scale group build.
Oh, great.
Yeah, that wrapped up, I guess, right before the holidays.
I assume that's the Tamiya kit.
It could be. It could also be a Hobby Boss kit.
Oh, just Hobby Boss made.
But I bet it's not.
I'll bet it's, yeah, right. Why
well, I don't know if they make an 85 or not. They may. I know they make some of the other one. Or, no, they make the KVs, don't they, in 48 scale.
Yeah.
Neither here nor there. He also partook in Andy's Hobby Headquarters Black Friday sale.
Oh, good. Yeah, I bet you that hurt.
Yeah. 4 kits later, he was done with that.
Oh.
That's not terrible.
No, it's not. Well, it depends. 4 48 scale kits, that's one thing. 4 16th scale kits,
yeah, that could be bad.
That could put a dent in you.
Well, in the new year, he wants to continue to hone his skills with finished models. He's got no set plan of he wants a number he wants to build. Just hopefully that 1 or 2 more than last year.
That's the best way to approach it. I really do think that it's nice to have goals and everything, but I think you can put artificial pressure on yourself if you do too much of that. And
putting goals on your list you're likely to not meet is never any fun anyway.
Exactly.
Well, John McAvoy writes in again. I'm always going on about BT5s.
Yes.
And he asked if I'd ever picked up the Hellcat Models BT5 3D resin conversion for the Hobby Boss BT2, and if so, what were my thoughts on it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, as a matter of fact, I do have that conversion kit, and I think it's pretty good. Hellcat is run by an old friend of mine named Scott Dimmick that I met via pen paling from the old Military Modeler magazine.
Yep.
We got into email, or not email, there was no internet.
Mail.
We got into hard copy mail back and forth for a number of years, and I finally met him face-to-face at AMPS, and maybe we'll see him at the next AMPS show, because I don't think he was at Fort Wayne. South Bend, sorry.
South Bend, not Fort Wayne.
So he's been doing those. It's pretty good. And maybe I'll get to it someday. I haven't built it yet, clearly, so I can't.
Well, if you get to it, that would probably cause whoever to produce a BT5 kit.
Well, there's that. And maybe I just need to do that. Maybe that should be under consideration for my 2025 new projects.
There you go.
I could do it that way.
You can go fondle that.
So, he's got a couple others, too. And Scott also made an interesting discovery about eccentricity in the turret ring on the BT2s and maybe the 5 as well. I don't know. That was kind of interesting. He noticed something in a photograph, and he's made the correction for that as well. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
One of those old German photos. Mike Shelley from Pearland, Texas, or is it Pearland or Pearland?
I couldn't tell you.
I'm going to find out now.
Yeah, that's right. You will.
Well, he listened to 130 on the way to Model Fiesta in New Braunfels, which that looked like that was a fun show.
That did. It really did. They Texans know how to have fun.
And as we've discovered, hot water is one of the best ways to get older, stubborn Japanese decals to behave. And he thinks it might even be mentioned in the kit instructions sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned it on the dojo. The reason for that is it's basically stamp gum that holds those things on the paper.
Yes.
And it's just solution chemistry. You warm it up, it can dissolve it faster, and there you go. That's why that works. Tip 2, use distilled water. You may not live in an area that has mineral deposits in your tap water, but why take a chance? Yeah, sometimes you can get some Tide rings on dark colors from decaling. I don't. I'm usually pretty good about getting almost all the water away, but
Me too.
It's kind of like some of Strange Brush's advice. It's kind of on that 99th percentile kind of.
Right.
You're wringing the last blood out of the turnip kind of thing. But it's good. It's a good point, especially if you live, oh gosh, Kentucky, we got some hard water here sometimes.
Yeah, we do. Although Louisville's got some great water.
Tip 3, scan your decal sheet before you start cutting it up. That way, if the decal fails catastrophically, you can possibly print a replacement.
Or make a stencil.
That's true.
Yep. That's a good idea.
And he hopes somebody finds these useful, and I suspect they will.
Yep.
Oh, longtime listener Terry Wilkinson's written in. He's heard us ramble on about burnishing tools, so he ordered the whole suite from Model Paint Solutions. So thank you for supporting Dr. Miller for us there, Terry. And he's kind of come up in the Shep era and primarily built AFVs from World War II. And he's started to go down the model aircraft hole. Hope I hadn't scared him off with my project. His question is, when adding the fiddly bits, such as pitot tubes, etc., what adhesive do you use?
Oh, Mike, you can answer this question.
And it's going to be unorthodox.
Okay.
I knew that these things were going to be a handling issue for somebody who doesn't build many airplanes. So were they to break off, I didn't want to have to finish breaking it off and creating a hole again.
Right. So
I bored all the holes and got them to like a just fit situation. So let me back up. I used some Albion alloys, aluminum telescoping tubing for the pitot tube.
Right.
And the big diameter was like 0.7 of a millimeter. So I had a 0.7 bit, and I'd already put the pilot holes in the wing faces before I finished the model.
Right.
Now let me back up. Lesson learned. Next time, I will complete those interfaces before the wing is ever attached to the aircraft next time.
Gotcha.
So that's my tip. One tip. And then I take those reamers. I've got a set of them. You probably do too. I can't remember where I got them.
Micro reamers, I got them at Bryant's at Scale Reproductions.
I got mine from the used to be this guy that would come to the shows in part of our region from Texas that had all his tools. The tool guy.
Man?
I don't know whatever happened to that guy.
I don't know.
But he had them, and I start sizing up that hole. Yeah, that was like 0.7 millimeters or 0.8, one or the other. And I had drill bits that were that size. But I really think using a drill bit can be a problem when you got a thin face and it's made out of two parts, and if it binds, you're just going to pop your wing joint.
Yeah.
So the reamers are really nice because they're long and slender, and they increase the diameter gradually as you twist them, and you can go a little bit, clean it out. And then what I do is I take a pin vise and I turn the drill bit around backwards to where I've got the shank end sticking out, and you can use it as a gauge pin.
Right.
And it won't cut the plastic as you're, sticking in the hole you just made. So once I get exactly the right size and I'm ready to glue that in, I flood that hole with Tamiya Extra Thin and push that pitot tube right in there.
Right. And you count on the melted plastic to...
We'll fill up the slop in that hole.
Right.
And it'll be tight enough that it's not going to fall out.
Right.
And I came back and I ferreted it in with paint. So it's there pretty much. I did the same thing with the cannons. I had aftermarket brass cannons I used. And same thing there. Those were basically set with liquid cement and then ferreted in with paint.
Yeah.
And as long as you're not pulling on them. If they get dinged and bent, I can just pull them out. And I got a hole that's the right size. I can just put them back in. In theory.
In theory.
Yes. So.
Well, just be careful with it so that you don't have that problem.
Yeah, I'm getting there. We'll talk more about that in a little while.
Like an antenna mast.
Well, what do you do? Seasoned aircraft builder.
I have done several different things, and it almost depends on the build. I have done what you just described, which I think is a really good method. Sometimes you get kits with holes that are too large, and so you either get some rod and plug them and re-drill them correctly. You can. Sometimes I will resort to gator glue or another white glue, which now you have to play with that, but it actually can. You've got a lot of time to play with it to get it where you want it, and when it dries, that's generally pretty darn good. And if for whatever reason it is impacted, brushed up against, it tends to pop out so that you can replace it as opposed to break off. I think the best thing to do is always make sure you use brass or aluminum. I think using a plastic pitot tube or plastic, anything like that in plastic, is just asking for it to eventually get broken.
Hope that helps.
Yep.
Can't wait to see Terry's first airplane. I'm serious. I'm not making a joke. It's no joke. I like people trying new horizons because I've done it, and we've talked about that a lot.
I think you learned a lot with this aircraft.
I did. Up next from Guelph, Ontario.
Hey, you said it right.
I quit guessing.
Okay.
Duncan Young.
Okay, that was good. I'm going to give you that one. That was good.
Duncan Young from the Hamilton Club.
We're going to see them soon, man.
If we can find a place to stay.
Yeah, well, we're working on that. And if I get my real ID on the 23rd.
You still got a passport.
Yeah, but it expires in April.
We'll go get it renewed tomorrow or Monday. All right, enough of that. Holiday modeling activity. So he's answering the call again, Dave.
Okay.
Unfortunately, his was interrupted with some deconstruction of his basement hobby room. So he's going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Rather than melting plastic, he's been tearing apart his hobby room. They had a leak in an exterior hose bib they found in the summer.
Oh.
And there was some exploratory stuff that had to be done to find it. They had to empty the room to do it.
I hate that.
Well, the bright side is he's now got an opportunity to install recessed lighting throughout the room.
Smart man. Take advantage. If you've got to deal with that, take advantage of it to redo the room.
Milk it for all it's worth.
Yeah, exactly.
And now he's got the ceiling exposed and the exterior wall above the foundation. He can install a dedicated exhaust duct for his spray booth to the exterior of the house. So,
that's great.
This is turning into an upgrade. So good on you, Duncan.
Yep. Take lemonades or take lemons and make lemonade.
And he says there'll be some very important Heritage Con announcements coming up regarding entry tickets and model registration inbound in the next week or so. So wanted us to be aware of that.
Okay.
And to remind everybody, the show is on Sunday, March 23rd of 2025 at the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum in Hamilton, Ontario. And I suspect we may be speaking to those guys ahead of time.
Yes, I suspect we will too.
Well, German scale modeling YouTube sensation Michael Reese, also known as Hamilcar Barkus, has sent us a lengthy email, and I'm going to touch on a couple of these. He says VMS varnish has pretty much saved his modeling, more or less, because he'd given up on clear coats.
Okay.
So he's cleaning up with AK airbrush cleaner and finishing up with some tap water, and it just works.
Okay.
That's how he does it. So I've not given up because, I bought the big bottles. So
right.
I need to figure out how to use it.
Right. People do use it and make it work. So it's not a matter of you can't. It's just a matter of figuring out what you do.
Not calling it dog crap and throwing it in the garbage yet, but clearly I'm doing something wrong, and I own that. So, yeah, that's the story, man. A lot of folks are doing good with it. I do for a little while, then my airbrush stops, and it's. I know it's the nozzle and tip size.
And you're not the only person who's had that problem. So again, it's a matter of figuring out what you need to do that works.
Well, the other one I'm going to pull from his email is he's been seeing a lot of better kits of like agricultural and construction equipment and vehicles coming to market. Mini Art, Revell, Hasegawa have released some tractors and stuff of late, and they're all pretty good. He says even a modern John Deere tractor would look awesome with a lot of mud and wear on it. Same for construction vehicles, excavators, trucks, dumpsters, cranes, all of it. He thinks it's really cool. And he's wondering what we think about it. All this equipment that helps keep the world going round.
I think it's fantastic. It has both traditional modeling uses. You know, you can model a Ukrainian tractor pulling one of those abandoned Russian tanks down a road, but you can do some of the most interesting dioramas that you see are not necessarily military dioramas. If you go to a show like MMSI or even like the Nationals, you'll see a diorama where it is something like construction equipment or it's a non-military modeling scene. And some of those can be some of the most effective dioramas. I really like it, and I'm thrilled that we're getting more and more of that dual-use stuff.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is the weathering, because you have a lot of this equipment that started out life as a glossy kind of automotive finish on it.
Yep.
And then it's got these big rust scabs on it. So you kind of got a interesting situation there that a lot of people have brought a lot of realism to their models.
Yep.
And it's cool. I've not gotten the bug yet, but God, what was it? You and the other Septemberists were jonesing over some 72nd scale
72nd scale tractor. It's one that it's an agricultural tractor, but it was also used on airfields to pull aircraft and do other stuff. So again, it's one of those dual use items, and you could build it on a 1930s farm, or you could put it on a 1940s airfield.
Up next from Charlotte, North Carolina, the voice of Bob Bear.
All right.
Voice of Plastic Model Mojo.
Yep, that's it.
Well, the new year is upon us, he says, and he's ready to hit the bench with new vigor.
Good.
Hopefully it'll last a month or so. Like us, he's been busy during the holidays, but he gets some bench time. He's been playing with his favorite present, the Display reciprocating sander. I've been seeing these all over in Facebook and places.
Yep.
Not meant to replace any Dremel type tool. It is great for minor shaping and smoothing jobs where the bigger tool is just too much.
Yep.
He's making progress on his Tamiya P38, though he says he put himself in a deep hole by getting all the aftermarket Edward makes.
Yeah, aftermarket can be a two-edged sword.
Yeah, hopefully it all fits.
Yeah.
And he's finished his Mung 72nd scale Dune ornithopters. They're just waiting for paint.
Yep. Those are cool.
That's been a popular kit.
Those have been very popular.
That's not a franchise I ever got into, but a lot of people have. So
I read the book. I read the books when I was a teenager.
He's looking forward to attending more shows. He says the IPMS Nationals for once is within driving distance. So yeah, he got TS in the aid one year. So
yeah.
He's not going to do that again. And he's got a local show, the Hope It Don't Snow show in Spartanburg.
Yep.
And his brother and he have planned to meet up in Louisville for the MMCL show, since his brother has a house up here. I didn't know that. Did he tell us that?
Yes, he did.
He's got digs in Kentucky?
Yep.
In Louisville?
I'm not exactly sure.
Okay. Let us know, Bob. We'll have another poolside chat. I missed last time.
Yes. Hey,
all right.
The voice of Bob came over and we sat out by my pool and had a great time.
All right. Well, Dave, Bob's going to end it for the email side of things. Don't let me forget. I've got one from Christian Gurney I want to mention right after their ad. And
well, I'm going to mention Christian in the DMs.
Okay. Well, that's fine. maybe you take care of it. Maybe send it to both of us. And a couple of folks have sent some show stuff in, and we got a show shout out we're going to do here in a week or so. And I'll make mention of all those during that. So keep me honest, Dave. Don't let me forget.
I won't.
Well, that's the email side, Dave. What's the DMs been looking at?
Well, speaking of shows, Mark Sprayberry of Sabo DM'd to remind us that the Atlanta Military Figure Society show is February 21st to 23rd, 2025. And he's going to post a copy of the flyer on the dojo. I have heard nothing but good things about that show. I've never been to it, and I'd love to go. But I know that Mark really likes it, and if you're in the area in February in Atlanta, the weather's probably going to be pretty good. Take advantage. Speaking of Christian Gurney, Mr. Gurney DM'd me and mentioned that Basis by Bill has a couple of new products that they're working on, and we're going to get Christian on for a vendor spotlight where we can talk about some of those things, because I really kind of like some of the stuff that he's mentioned that they're working on. So I can't wait to hear a little more and to share it with the listeners. Our friend Paul Gloster, the Quokka,
Been in California.
was in the United States in both Texas and California. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see him this trip, but of course, being the world traveler that he is, I'm sure we'll see him for the Nationals, if not another show sooner. I don't know. But yeah, the Quokka has made an appearance in the United States. Got a DM from, as he phrases it, a Brit in exile in Nova Scotia. Bob Chambers reached out and sympathized with us over the fact that some Canadian left the door open and we got all this snow. But in addition to that, he was talking about products that he would love to see for modeling that don't currently exist. And he was talking about ejection seat handles for a modern aircraft ejection seat, which are the braided yellow and black. He doesn't like, taking a piece of wire and painting it and alternating stripes, doesn't think that looks good. And, you can't really twist a really tiny yellow and black wire together and make it look right. He's just waiting for somebody to come up with that product. So who knows? Maybe somebody will, but I agree with him that if somebody figured out how to do that in the aftermarket, that would be a great product. Rock Rozak reached out and gave us a little preview of what they're working on. Their next book is going to cover the Allison-engined P-51s.
Oh.
He sent a couple of images from a couple of the pages, and like always, those things are just, if you're working on a model and you need a single reference for the model, if there's a detail and scale available, that's always the one to go to, because you're going to get the history, you're going to get the detail differences on the different versions. You could get plenty of photographs, both detail photographs and overall markings photographs, which are good for helping with weathering. I can't wait to see it. I'm sure it's going to be great. Listener John Colasante is making me jealous because
You put him on to something good.
Yes, he was going to be in Pensacola, Florida, and I made sure that he got to the National Museum of Naval Aviation. And just like when I talk about the Nationals, I did not undersell the oversell the National Museum of Naval Aviation. He spent a whole day there and told me through DMs that it wasn't enough, that he needed more. It is just, in my opinion, the best aviation museum I've ever been to. And he got to go there and had a really good time.
I need to go there. I've never been.
Oh, it is awesome. There aren't quite as many aircraft as there are at the U.S. Air Force Museum.
That'd be tough.
But the layout is just so nice. The design, the fact that none of the aircraft are behind barriers. You can walk up, touch, go under, look in the cockpit of any of the aircraft there. It's just fantastic. I've been a member of that museum foundation for probably 25 or 30 years, and I fully support it. So if you're in Pensacola, do not pass up going to that museum.
Got any more?
Last one. Our friend Bruce Worrell.
Yep.
Listened to us talk about decals. And he said we didn't mention the one thing that he does, which is when he puts a decal down, he uses a Q-tip to roll out any water trapped under the decal. Once he gets it where he wants, he uses a Q-tip to do that, which I've done in the past. Now, I told him that what I tend to do with that now is I tend to use a silicone brush, just simply because you don't have the problem with hair shedding that you get with the Q-tip. But he just wanted to mention that that's what he does to squeeze out any excess water that might be hiding under the decal once he's got it where he wants it.
Another tip.
Yep.
It's kind of what I use my damp, flattened out brush for.
Yep, exactly.
It'll pull most of that out from under the decal if you put it right down at the film edge.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Yes, good stuff.
A lot of good email.
Yeah, a lot of good DMs.
Well, folks, get in on it. Send us some more because we're all out now. You can do that by sending email to plasticmodelmojo@gmail.com or direct messaging us through Facebook Messenger system. And we look forward to each and every one.
If you've listened this far, we would appreciate when you're done listening to go to whatever podcasting app you use, Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it is. Rate us, give us 5 stars. We appreciate it. It helps us grow. Also, if you have a modeling friend who isn't listening to Plastic Model Mojo, please recommend us to them. If they need a little help them to download a podcasting app and subscribe to the podcast. The best way for us to grow an audience is a personal recommendation from a current listener. We continue to grow. We want to continue to grow. 2025 is going to be a big year for us. Frankly, we're going to have a tough time topping 2024, but I think we can do it. And a lot of it's down to your all's helping.
Well, we'd also like you to check out the other podcasts out in the model sphere, and you can do so by going to www.modelpodcasts.com. It's Model Podcast, plural. This website is a consortium of banner links set up with the help of Stuart Clark at Scale Model Podcast up in Canada. He's aggregated all the links, and you can go to that URL and check out all the other podcasts who are participating in this spirit of cross-promotion with us. We've also got a lot of blog and YouTube friends. We've mentioned Chris Wallace, Model Airplane Maker, great blog and YouTube channel. Evan McCallum, Panzermeister 36, great YouTube channel. You're going to want to check that out. Sprue Pie with Frets with Stephen Lee, long and short form blog. You can go get a lot of great modeling content there, especially if you're into 70-second scale. You can do good with Steve there. And speaking of 70-second scale, you're going to want to check out Jeff Grove's blog, The Inch High Guy.
Yep.
And all that's good stuff. Please check it out. Oh, and one more. Can't not mention Paul Budzik Scale Model Workshop.
Well, and Evan.
I did say Evan.
Oh, did you say Evan?
You sleeping on me?
I'm sorry. I missed it. Well, there were so many of them. We've got so many modeling YouTube and podcast and blog friends. It's hard to keep them all straight. If you're not a member of your national IPMS organization, IPMS USA, IPMS Canada, IPMS Mexico, whatever nation you happen to be in, if you're not a member of your national organization, please join. And also, if you are into armor modeling or post-1900s figure modeling, please consider joining AMPS, the Armor Modeling and Preservation Society. Great group of modelers who are dedicated to advancing the art of armor modeling.
Plastic Model Mojo is brought to you by Model Paint Solutions, your source for Harder and Steenbeck airbrushes, David Union power tools, and laboratory-grade mixing, measuring, and storage tools for use with all your model paints, be they acrylic, enamels, or lacquers. Check them out at www.modelpaintsolutions.com.
Well, Dave, we got something a little different tonight for our special guests.
Yep.
To reiterate the backstory, and I'm pretty sure it was Steve Rui who had written in as a listener about losing his mojo, which is an issue we're trying to fix on this podcast.
Exactly.
And our guest tonight wrote a response back and had some suggestions for him and mentioned journaling as a possible solution to overcome his, what's essentially writer's block for modelers, I guess you could say that. Steve has published a journal for scale modelers, and we had him on the show to talk about that concept a little bit and how it might help some of you out there. And he sent us some copies and we reviewed it, and it was a fun conversation. We kind of meandered a little bit on some topics, but they're all fun, kind of stuck to the table of contents of the journal. It's just an interesting concept, Dave, to actually use a disciplined writing to get through ideas and situations and whatever.
And I'll tell you, after our conversation and after looking at the journal, I've committed. I'm going to try it and see if it does indeed help with my mojo.
Well, Dave, we've got something a little different tonight. We have listener Steve Anderson from Matamidi, Minnesota with us. Steve, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really good. I'm happy to be here.
Well, Steve, you've written into the show several times. I know you've been a listener for a long time, but I can't remember the exact situation it was. I think it was, we had a gentleman asking about finding his motivation again. I believe that's the email it was.
Yes.
And you responded to him, and you said some fairly general things, and then you provide a link to this journal book you've done titled A Guided Journal for Modelers, Making the Most of Your Hobby. And we just kind of went from there and getting hooked up with you and trying to see what that's all about. So before we get into the journaling, folks might like to know a little bit about your background. I mean, from modeling to even the journaling. Assume there's more to this journal than just this book for you.
Yeah, well, the important stuff, right? Grew up with Revell and monogram kits, right, in the 80s. So my brother, who's 3 years older, he was building models. My cousins were building models. So I'm like, well, I'm going to start building models. And so did that in my teens. A lot of World War II stuff because that's what my brother and cousins were reading. So I read it. So like building models, I got to be careful what I read because, I read all those military books and then went into the army. So I'm easily influenced, right? But stop building like all the reasons guys stop building. And then in my 30s, I started building again. And I had branched out as a kid. I loved Robotech, right? It's Macross,
yes,
Japan.
Right.
But I ended up with some, Macross kits, right? They have great battleships that are like 15 pieces. There's Entrati ships that you can put together in a weekend, and started back into it and haven't stopped since I got back in, which is probably why my stash is so huge. And then on the journaling side, so I was an English teacher at community college for 20 years, but I was also teaching student success classes, right? And we're always looking into how do people get motivated? What are the roadblocks to being successful at school? And I would always take extra classes on things like, neuroscience, anything that would make me feel like a better teacher. And so that's where I started moving into, coming up with good questions to get people to think. And one of the reasons that I started these guided journals is because, whatever works for me, great, but who cares? Because there's just one me, right, in my situation. And so what I love about having good questions is, I know what works for me, but I don't know what works for somebody else. And so the questions never, there's no expected answer. It's like, well, what do you think? And what's going to work for you? And so that's why guided journals, right? So it's got questions that can get you thinking about, what's important to modeling for you, right? What's your biggest roadblock? And then I throw in without saying it, right? And I might say neuroscience 5 times tonight, but just kind of ignore that. I'm not saying that to like, oh, look, he's using the big word or something. It's because this isn't just, oh, Steve had an idea. Like I listened to On the Bench and I can just hear Julian, right, saying, oh man, I can't do the Australian accent. Sorry. But, oh man, anybody could come up with a bunch of questions. And it's like, yeah, but these will be, a lot of them are sort of based on things. I'll just give you one quick example. In there's one neuroscience course I took, it was great. And they said, environment always wins. So whatever your intention is, it doesn't matter if, like, say you want to build, but your bench is a mess. Well, you're not going to build, right? It doesn't matter. So environment wins. So I've got questions that don't say anything about environment winning, but get you to look at your bench and what do you want it to be. So that's kind of a little bit of the background of some of what shapes the questions.
Well, it's interesting because I know of, journaling as a hobby in and of itself, and I know of journaling to where I'm familiar with it is kind of in the context of what you're doing here is kind of the opposite. It's using the journaling to get over something that's not so great, not to enhance something that you're doing that's good. So this is interesting because I guess I was unfamiliar with this application, and I think neuroscience is fair.
It's great. Like one of the other things, and this is in journal, is if you say I want to do something big, right? That's huge. That's daunting, right? I'm going to build a full model. Well, holy crap. There's so much to go into it, especially if it's an aircraft for me. The cockpit is going to stop me for a month, right? But if I pick something really small, right, I'm not going to build the whole thing. I'm just going to do this small start. I'm much more motivated. I do that small thing, and then the brain science on this is you get that dopamine hit. And by doing the small thing, it can lead you to the bigger. So each journal entry has the question, some space, and you can write as little as you want or as much as you want, right? And always come back later and see what's changed. And the last part is a place for an insight or an action step. So you can take it. And here's the thing, right, Mike, how do you get this to be something where it's not just, your diary, which there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want action, right, I want to get more out of your modeling, there's that, okay, what's that insight or what's that step that you can take to move in the direction where you want to go? So you're having the most fun that you can have.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. A lot of the questions are interesting. What inspired you to take this approach with modeling and then direct that toward other modelers? Well,
it's a funny story. And this involves, I wanted to make sure everything I talk about is going to involve models because this is the show for talking about modeling. I was teaching a mythology class and I had questions that would be, you'd read a story about fighting a dragon. So then to make it real, I would have, I wouldn't ask them to tell me about the story. I'd ask them, okay, so what dragon do you have to fight, right? What's the dragon you have to battle? What's the reward for you afterwards? And they totally got into it, right? Because all of a sudden now it's like, oh yeah, it gives you a framework to look at things differently. And then at this class, a mythology class, probably won't come as a surprise, tons of Star Wars fans in it. And then Star Trek. And so at the end of the semester, and this is my last semester of teaching, I said, okay, I'm going to leave it. So I had a bunch of Star Trek models and a bunch of Star Wars models. And for like the last 3 weeks after class was over, I would have raffles, right? They just for showing up, right? You get your entry in there, and was just giving away Star Trek and Star Wars models, and they loved it. It became like a fun 5 minutes at the end of class, and some of them were taking them for themselves, and some of them were like, "Oh, my dad's going to love this Enterprise," and that's so. That was a great way to clear off some space. So now I've got some more shelf space to build, and giving it to some people who are like really enjoying having this. And I'm not being modest. I am a mediocre modeler, and that's just honest. If there's a seam showing, I'm okay with that right now. I want to get better, but when you're giving stuff away for free or to people who aren't model builders too, I think for those of us who aren't really see ourselves as high quality builders yet, it's like people will still appreciate them because they don't know everything that goes into it and they don't have that picture in their head. So that was just a really fun way to clear some built models off the shelf space.
Steve, the first question that occurred to me when I saw your journal, the cover of it is your classic green builder's mat. That,
Yes.
One of those self-healing cutting mats. And I have to ask, is this a photo of your actual building mat from your hobby bench?
Absolutely. And it only took me 10 different tries to get the picture just right and the lighting for it to work. But yeah, that's my mat.
It is a well-worn modeler's mat with all of the stains and cuts and other stuff that a modeler's mat accumulates over time. And it's the perfect cover for this journal.
We're talking about the journal, but I just want to make sure too, before we go any farther, that, there are some major things I've gotten from listening to your show, right? In the guests that you have. So I just want to thank you for that. Like, I think one of the reasons that I always go to Wonderfest, right? But going to other local shows, that was totally, you guys, right? Saying it, joining amps, right? Dave, you know what I mean? So you guys have done a lot for me, just kind of making me branch out, get out more. And thank you for that. That's just one thing. But
were you at amps this past, or I'm not amps. Were you at Wonderfest this past year?
No, it's about a 9.5 hour, 10-hour drive. So I'm about every 4 years for Wonderfest.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason I asked is both Mike and I managed to be at Wonderfest this past year. And you're right, it's just absolutely wonderful. Question that occurred to me, I don't hesitate to say this. Modelers as a group tend to be fairly intelligent people on the whole. There are lots of doctors and lawyers, engineers, college professors, architects, etc. And a lot of them, because of that, this hobby seems to attract people with that kind of intelligence. Before you did this, when you were building in the hobby, did you have just a regular notebook that you made notes on your projects as you built them?
No, I am, I have that in the back because I know there's a lot of people who like keeping track of things.
Right.
For my models, I have not been doing that. One of the things that now that I have this journal, I use it myself too. And, one of the things that I want to do is build in more regular time. I'm a sporadic builder, so I might go a month without doing anything. And then in the next month, I'll build 3, and then go for a pause.
So do you think this journal will help you become more regular at the bench?
I don't know about regular, but I already know as far as like having more fun and feeling just better about it, it's already doing that. And for me, it's my stash. Because one of the questions, the first question, and there's a reason whenever I make a guided journal, the first question is always, what's your vision for, what's your vision for modeling? What do you want it to be like? Because everything else builds on that. So it's important to say, what it is that you want. And I was just looking at it, and it's funny because I went to Nordicon and sold some of my stash. And then, that felt good. And, that was just good. And so now I'm going to Hope It Doesn't Snow in Rochester on the 1st. I got another table and I'm going to sell. And my wife, Katie, she goes, you've had this stash for decades, literally. And she's like, what's going on? Why now? She's not complaining. But she's like, why now? And I went and looked back. And the third thing that I wrote for what's my vision is I want the right size stash. That's what I put down. And I only wanted kits in the stash. And to me, that was the right size it's still a ton, but I only want kits that I want to build. Right. And it was funny to go back and look at that because, as far as moving my stash, I am going through, picking out the stuff that I'm like, I'm never going to build that. And it just feels great. I'm creating up space. I'm going to local shows and meeting and talking with people. So there's this effect that I didn't even think of when I said I want to lower my stash. And that's from me sitting down because 90% of my stash, right, is in the attic, kind of hidden. Well, so I don't think about it a lot until I wrote that down. So more regular, I don't know. I hope so, but it was interesting for me right now. That's the biggest thing. And it makes me feel good about my stash. I don't have to feel guilty about it or just what am I doing? It's like, no, okay, I'm getting rid of the ones that don't, keeping the ones that I like. And, it's funny. I feel lighter and also, converting empty space into, the first time I went up, there's a Hobby Town is a good hobby store outside of Duluth, and they actually do consignment. And I walked in with a bin and came back a couple weeks later, walked out with a 1/32 scale old Revell Focke-Wulf. I'm like, oh, this is good, right? Give in 10, walk out with 1 and happy about it. So I'm having more fun. That's for sure.
Well, it's funny you talk about the stash when my lovely bride, when I first showed her my hobby, we were obviously still dating, and showed her the stash, and she's like, why would you buy all this?
Yeah.
And one of the points I made to her is I can point to every model in my stash and I can tell her exactly what I intended to do with that model, what markings I wanted it in, if it's for a diorama or something like that, what it was intended to be. Mike makes the point occasionally that the stash is actually part of the hobby. That just like building, the acquisition and the curation of the stash is actually a big part of the hobby. And I that's absolutely true. And for me, even to this day, I can go into my stash, which is too big, I will admit, and can tell you what I intend to do with every model in there.
Yeah, I've got models that just unbuilt models in a box that just make me smile.
I do too.
Yep.
It's like, that's not bad for a chunk of plastic that's not even put together yet.
Exactly.
From my desk right now, I can look up and I can see I have the SDF1 Macross, a new kit. When I was a kid, there was, I can't remember if it was Revell or Monogram, whichever one bought the rights to Robotech, the modeling. And they had an SDF1, which I built. And I have to say, it is so bare bones, right? Just so, it's like a 70s Testers model of a Corsair without a cockpit kind of deal, like lots of low decals. And now this one is a Hasegawa, and it's beautiful. You're just looking at the box and pulling out the parts and going, oh man, yeah, that's just a couple of minutes of, I'm smiling right now just from looking at that kit. And hopefully within the next 15, 20 years, I'll build that one.
Yeah, like kind of my kind of timeline.
Well, you can't rush it except if here's one thing that I was thinking of too is just about writing this stuff down. I think stash, I know for myself, that is a interesting conversation to have with your spouse or future spouse, right? And to see how they go about what's going on. I'm like, yep, that's it. And that's big. But I, for the longest time, have, those Ming has those tune tanks.
Yep.
Right. And I would look at them and go, it's got to be realistic and everything. And then one time I got one and I built it. And for me, if I'm burned out or just want to build something, but just want it to be fun for the weekend, I've built like 10 of the different cartoon tanks because for me, it's like, oh, I don't have to worry about realism, right? It's a weekend build. I can paint it, make it real simple, and then decide if I want to do weathering, so I love having a simple build and getting to the point where I used to put weird standards on for no particular reason, right? It's like, oh, it looks fun. Build the thing, Steve. Why are you talking yourself out of modeling? And I think so. Some of the questions I have in here too are like, what's one of the biggest roadblocks you have to modeling, and then what are some things you could do to move around it, or what's that biggest idea that's holding you back, and then I think that one says like, what are 5 true things, that would also help you get past that mental block that, you're setting up here. Because I don't know about other people, I've absolutely taken the fun out of modeling every once in a while just for crazy, thoughts. It's not good enough, or why am I not doing this? And it's like, man, Steve, you're forgetting why you bought the models in the first place.
Right. Every time I look at those tune tanks, I'm like, why is they doing it? But I cannot tell you the number of modelers who have told me that they've had the exact same experience you have, that they sat down and they built one just as a palate cleanser because they were stuck on, quote unquote, their real modeling.
Yeah.
And that it just provided them a joyful experience that was modeling, that they didn't put any pressure on themselves, and the end result they enjoyed, and it got them motivated. It got their mojo back to get moving on, quote unquote, regular modeling.
Yeah. So that's me. I'm Toon Tank. So Mike and Dave, do you have you guys make longer projects? Do you got any palette cleansers that you do? I suppose for Dave, it's a 0.
Well, no, actually, for the longest time, and I have not done one in a while, and I will probably do one again. For me, a great palette cleanser was always a little 700 scale modern submarine.
Okay.
And I'll bet you, if I went and looked in my case, there
looks like Norfolk.
Yeah, 7 or 8 700 scale Russian, US, British, Japanese modern submarines. And part of the reason for that is they are very few parts. They're there's no real detailing to it. It's a tube with a conning tower on it and a couple of dive planes, and that's it. And that always, for me, when I was stuck, and I haven't done one in a while, but that for me was always my palette cleanser.
I don't know that my work really manifests itself in that way. I've got things that I started that had the intention of being kind of a low key kind of thing, that ended up enjoying them, but they ended up being more than what I intended from the start. And the one that comes to mind first is I was kind of between projects, and I built that little Airfix Morris tractor in Beaufort. And I'd built that kit as a kid. And, basically all I did was paint the tires black, put the decals on it, and it was running around, chewing up the Africa Corps, my little HO scale fighting soldiers from Airfix. It's what it was doing. But anyway, I was like, when I bought it, I thought it was going to be this cool, great thing, and I was going to do such a great job on it. It's going to be my little masterpiece. And you know how that usually ends up when you're a kid. Usually not the way you intended, but mine still got good use. But I guess this thing, I got into it and I enjoyed it, and it just kept getting more toward that vision I had as a kid. And surprisingly, it's been very good at shows. Been a popular model for me. I get a lot of compliments on it, and I think it looks pretty good. But it's mine. I guess I'm probably biased, but it's made me pick up a few more of those. At some point, when I feel the need, I'm gonna crack one of those out and do one of the others I did as a kid, or one that I always wanted to but never did.
Well, that's one thing that occurs to me, Mike, is you got a ton of enjoyment out of that build. I mean,
Yes.
you were having fun from beginning to end. At no point during that build were you like, I don't want to go do this. Or at no point were you facing some sort of huge obstacle that got you down.
Right. Yeah, that there's like maybe one technical challenge in that thing that I put on myself. And really it was not much more than that. But it's a good escape build. As during COVID, I built that one. So
I've totally gone back and picked a model that I built as a kid and to build it again, relaxed with a much better airbrush, if I even was using the airbrush back then, and just that's fun. It's like time travel.
Well, your journal's broken up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections to count right here on air. And a lot of stuff we've been dancing around here in the last few minutes is in the very first section, getting the most from the hobby. And there's a lot of stuff here that's important. And I'm just curious, if I started writing these down, which I probably am going to, taking modeling risks, negative self-talk around modeling, things like that are all kind of how adventurous of a model are you? And they all kind of culminate down to like line item 28, the number one roadblock to your modeling. Cause it kind of, all these things kind of feed into that. And I can see this guide. If you journal these things a little bit, you maybe get a little sense of what's holding you back and whether you like taking risks and what does success mean to you and things like that.
Yeah, and the nice thing I think too for anybody who's thinking about this, when it says how adventurous you are, it's one of those hey, how adventurous you are on a scale of 1 to 10, sort of, and what do you think of that number? There's no right answer, right? Some of us, I'm not super adventurous, and I think sometimes it's nice to go, oh, you know what? I'm not. Maybe I want to push myself. Great, so I do, or maybe it's just like what, I have about 10 Destroids. Old 80s kits from Macross. And I can build one of those every 6 months and just enjoy the heck out of it just because, I got such fond memories from the show. So, it's not like, oh, I'm going to be more adventurous. So you can if you want. It's really too about finding out what kind of modeler do you want to be, and just be that guy or gal, right? Because somebody else can be Panzermeister 36, who is awesome. And I just watched a really good basic weathering thing there, which I'm totally going to try, but that's awesome. I'm a different builder, and it took me a while though. I honestly probably didn't build for a while because the stuff wasn't going to look as good as I could be in my mind. And that was one of the things that, for me, I had to get over as a modeler, because it was just like, I get it, Steve, but stop being a knucklehead, sometimes I have to get out of my own way. Right. And I think some of these questions are to help us figure out, we all get in our own way in different ways. And so here's a chance to spend a little bit of time, and you don't have to, you can do this in any way you want, right? It could be a bulleted list. You could write out paragraphs. It really doesn't matter as long as they're coherent thoughts, right? That you put down that make sense. It will, it will move you forward. There's some cool stuff about how writing and typing is totally different, even in how your brain works. Your brain is way more active, right, when you're handwriting as opposed to typing and stuff. So it's crazy how it really does work. It's different, right? Instead of spending 10 minutes scrolling on something, maybe just pick a question that seems right and spend a few minutes and see what happens, or, jump around, find a topic that feels good for the, in the moment. You don't have to go in order at all, but there is an order if you want.
Mike and I were recently talking with Paul Budzig. One of the nice things about talking with him is that he really thinks about modeling beyond the surface technique stuff. He actually has some really great philosophical insights. And he was talking about modeling being creation and modeling intentionally. And I think that probably a lot of modelers, because it's our hobby and we want to enjoy it, a lot of us don't, and I'd include myself in this, a lot of us don't think deeply about what it is why this hobby is our hobby and what we get out of it and what we enjoy out of it and what we don't enjoy out of it. And I think something like your journal really will help somebody actually stop and think about those for a second. And I think for many modelers, if they do, I think the answers will surprise. I think their answers will surprise themselves sometime and may really lead to a new insight into why they build, why they enjoy this particular hobby as opposed to golfing or bass fishing or whatever, be a cross stitch, whatever other hobby. And that's, to me, when I look at this, that is one of the big benefits I see from it.
Well, and I hope that happens. And because it's a great hobby. And I had, for a while when I got back into it, it took me a little bit I did it as a kid. Now I'm doing it as an adult. And I was private about it. And in my office when I was teaching, at one point I got to the point where I'm like, you know what? This is something that I do. I don't want to not be showing who I, fully for work, right? I don't want to just all be not saying who I am and have no personality. So I picked a couple models and put them up on a filing cabinet in my office. And as English teacher, so all of us, we just have a ton of books in our offices. I put a couple models up, and I was actually sweating bullets, right? I was nervous. Is somebody going to walk by and go, "What's that stupid stuff?" or something? Don't kids do that? And it was the exact opposite. People would walk by and they'd be, "Hey, what's that? Did you make that?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." And they weren't model builders. So they would be like, "Wow, that must have took a lot of time." And I'd be like, "Oh, it was fun." And then, so my colleagues, it was like, "Oh, look, we're supportive students." All of a sudden they had something to look at. A lot of times they would just be, going to talk to a professor isn't always fun. So they'd be, "Oh, look, he's human." He's got a model up, or I'd have something up too, like from like something I think they would recognize. So something from Star Wars or something. And it was like my planting my flag, saying to the public in the world that, yeah, I build models and I enjoy it and it's cool. And once I did that, though, I felt I was afraid at first, right? That what people would, and then I'm like, I just had to get over that because dang it, I enjoy it. And ever since I've done that, right, it has been nothing but positive, and I only had a couple up. I wouldn't go crazy, but, giving away to the students at the end and just having conversation pieces. And so making this journal was absolutely, a passion project, and, putting something out there and say, this is a real hobby that's a hell of a lot of fun, and it's for all ages, right? It's like tennis and golf for sports. You can play that as long as your knees last, right? And so, yeah, it's a lifetime hobby. And I think as long as it's a lifetime hobby, right, let's make sure we're getting the most out of it.
Well, it raises a question for me. Have you thought about a volume 2? Have you thought about, okay, now that you've done this, did you suddenly, once you completed it and published it and put it out in the world, think, "Oh, I should have put this in, or I should have put that in"? And has that led you to start doing a volume 2?
Well, I didn't say I should have, but I have all of a sudden started saying, ooh, and I can add. So yes, I am actually starting on this. It's going to be well because I have some other projects in there, but I'm thinking of, and I will definitely be, keeping my ears open for feedback. But going forward, I have some new ideas for questions, right? Whether it's going more into specifics or, taking some of that stuff that I love, like about flow and how you get into flow and figuring out. So like from all the research, if you want to get into that flow, right, it's having that challenge that's just a little bit above where you're at, right? So you're not bored and you're excited. It's like, okay, so I'm starting to think, how can I take those things that we know and turn them into good questions for volume 2, advanced questions for getting the most out of your hobby thing. But definitely, I think in 6-7 months, very good chance of volume 2.
That's good news.
Well, I think a roadblock a lot of us run into that the next section in the book is things around the hobby, the building part of the hobby. And you just got a lot of questions here that I think a lot of us ask these for certain projects and a lot of times, but this is pretty comprehensive. I think there's techniques and things that's where a lot of fear comes in for people. Back in the first section of the book is how adventurous of a modeler are you? And then the negative self-talk around modeling. A lot of that stuff probably centers around, I would think, things you don't think you're very good at. And maybe you need a plan to get the level up to something you could be satisfied with.
Yeah, right. And I think for so many of us, right, and I'm sure you guys have even mentioned it, right? What's your plan for getting better? And there is something concrete about, writing down. It's like, dang it, I'm just I got a finished model. It looks good. I'm afraid of weather. Maybe, that's the thing. Okay, what are some simple things you could do to start trying out weathering, right? And then instead of becoming some very big, oh my goodness, weathering, it's like, well, maybe I can do a pin wash, and that doesn't seem so daunting, right? And what do I need? I'll get a couple oil paints and some thinner. I already got the brush. Now all of a sudden it becomes something realistic and easy that, oh, well, I can do that. I don't have to become a master at weathering. I can just take the one kit that I have or an old one off the shelf, heck, even if I want, I've never done it before, and do low cost attempts at this stuff. There's definitely in those questions that idea of figuring out what you're up for, right? What's a small step you can take that's actually going to move you forward? And I think a lot of times the rest takes care of itself, right? Once you get going.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And your neighbor, Steve Hustad up there in Minnesota, he talks about spending a lot of time experimenting and practicing. And that's something Dave and I have taken to heart during this past year. And yeah, you just got to figure out how to get to the starting point and then give it a shot.
And not being afraid to fail. Steve talks about experimenting and doing a lot of experimenting before you try something on the model, so that when you finally do it on the model, you already know how to succeed. But failure teaches us too. And as much as success makes us better, failure makes us better too. But people, a lot of modelers, and myself included, have a fear of failure that, especially when a project is really, really going well, that becomes a bigger and bigger boulder to push up the hill.
So you guys just gave me an idea. We need a new category out there at shows.
Uh-huh.
Screw ups, failures, last minute destruction, just where people bring out their kit that looks great until they blew it at the end or in the middle that's half built, right? Because we see Steve Hustad, at least I've seen his stuff at Nordicon. Holy crap.
Yes. Yep.
Beautiful. And now you said it. He talks about experimenting and he's failed, but I never see his failures, right? I just see this beautiful thing with 20 handmade sheep that he made that are, 4 different models of the sheep in there. It would be great. There should be a category where people get to bring in a kit that they just botched,
They messed up.
and have a table, right? And then everybody can go by and go, oh, yeah, I did that. Oh,
Yeah.
that's a new one, and just have, I think of the conversations at that table. We could all bring in our messed up, but then have an award for the
good effort
took a
award.
risk.
Yeah.
You tried.
Yeah. Nice
Right.
try award.
Yes, a nice try coin. I could bring a lot of models to that table.
Yeah. You and me both.
Well, we talked about the stash at the front end of this. So the last question section of your book is sharing the hobby and the future. So some important stuff there too. You mentioned bringing your models in so coworkers could see them. I've kind of done that sort of. My slideshow on my screensaver is a bunch of my builds and some of our colleagues' builds are running across there. But I think when I get this float plane done, it's going to go to the office with me.
Nice. And, there's a lot of ways too to do that. I mean, if you don't have an office or it's just not something that's going to fit there, right? Like screensaver, having it on your phone. I've got one or two guys who aren't modelers, and every once in a while, if I build something and I'm happy with it, I'll just send it with a picture to them, right? So there's other ways to, having it on your screensaver, on your phone, plenty of ways to, on this kind of on the subtle side too, to have it if you don't just want to, or if it doesn't really fit in, where you are. So, if you're cross country driving, there's nobody going to see it. But I'm just thinking how much you could, I know cross country truckers, right, listen to a lot of podcasts. That would be cool to see if there's a semi out there somewhere that's got, some stuff hanging in the cab. That would be cool in the back.
Well, we actually have interacted with listeners who are modelers and long haul truckers.
At least three.
And at least three that I can think of off the top of my head. And all of them, listen to a lot of podcasts because they're doing a lot of driving, but also in modern trucking, they have the room where they can take with them a basic modeling kit and a model and can work on it while they're on the road.
That sounds good. I have taken like a building was really good. I actually had a water damage to my house once. I couldn't live in it for like a week. And so I spent some time at a hotel, and it was great to, at the end of the day, right, working, the house is a mess and being torn up because of all the water damage. And then to spend a half an hour just painting different brick colors, on this brick house was like so relaxing and nice and easy to do, right? All in a little bin with the building and some paints. That can be a nice, relaxing way to, when you're not at home too. That's simple.
Well, one of the first amazing modelers I ever met back when I was, in fact, still in law school in my early 20s was a man named Carter Scales. And Carter was your old-fashioned traveling salesman. He worked for a company, and he had a route that he traveled constantly in these same cities, visiting these same clients and trying to visit new prospects in his territory. Well, of course, after he had done the circuit a few times, he'd seen everything in all these towns that he wanted to see. And so he had a little case, and he went to the hotel at the end of his workday, wherever he was in whatever town he was, and he, on the little desk in the hotel room, opened up his work case and modeled. And he produced some of the most amazing models I've ever seen built to this day. I mean, these things were gorgeous, which just goes to show you can, if you're determined to do it, you can do that anywhere.
Yeah, and how much more satisfying too. I like vegging out in front of a television in front of any, like, other people too, but sometimes compare that to, right,
Yeah.
spending a half an hour and have something that you built. I mean, there's just no comparison.
Yep. Screens can be the enemy. You find yourself just staring at them just to stare at them. And that's always a mistake. And one I am guilty of.
Well, one in sharing of the hobby, you know, Dave and I talk a lot about getting out to shows and things like that, whether you're into the competitive side of things or not. A lot of us aren't or were and aren't anymore, etc. That's sharing of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, granted it's with like-minded people, but putting your stuff out there in front of your peers, it can be tough sometimes.
Yes. And though, also sharing the hobby, though, doesn't have to be with your peers. So like I wish neither of my boys like Star Wars. I was 7 when Star Wars came out. So, you know, that mattered to me. I did this smart stuff to try to get him to building models, right? Took something in my oldest liked horror. I got him the guillotine model, right? My youngest at the time, he loved monster trucks. So we actually got a monster truck built, a Gravedigger, I think it was, right? And then it just panned out. It's like, dang it, it's not their thing. But they will sink a ship with me in the pond. So they've sank the Gato, they've sank a battleship, the Missouri, right? And they sank a one piece. So it's like probably not your typical way of sharing your modeling is, you know, shooting them and sinking them, right? But that is a weird way, but I share with my hobby. And then down the street, there's this really nice couple, and they've got three boys who are like, you know, 4, 6, and 8, or maybe 6, 8, and 10, just, you know, tons of energy. And we were talking, and we're like, hey, I build models, and like, oh, the dad is really cool. And he's like, oh, I want to do that. And so went over there with some really simple kits, but just because I wanted them to have something that they could do besides put them together, I brought over some, and this probably wasn't the smartest idea, but some panel line stuff. So they built a little model because they didn't want them to have to worry about painting or anything. And then they put the panel line so the stuff popped. And they loved it. And their fingers were all black because they wouldn't let it dry before they were touching it, right? And so I'm like, sorry about that, James. But, you know, their fingers are black. They're smiling. You know, the next time I see them, they're like, hey, when are we going to build a model? You know, and so absolutely going to the shows, or I've been thinking about, I know there's 2 clubs in the Twin Cities and I want to get to one of those, but it can be, you can neighbors, family, and you might come up with some creative ways to share the hobby, whether it involves a BB gun or something else. Be open to whatever pops up, because that's the cool thing. I think, Dave, you mentioned this, right? That you never know the idea that's going to come to you unless you sit down for, 5-10 minutes and actually write it out. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, right?
Yeah.
I could do that. That might be fun. I'll give it a try. Why not?
Well, I think in wrapping up tonight, we're going to let folks know that, and you know too, Steve, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but, you know, Dave and I do our shop talk about once a month on the as the feature of the episode. And Dave, I think we need to take some of these questions as maybe one of our questions on the shop talks. And
I agree with you.
Give our hot take on some of these, at least for a little while, and maybe some other folks will start thinking about some of this stuff and take to this journal.
I'm anxious to sit down and start writing in it and thinking about some of those questions. Steve, tell people where they can get it.
Okay, so there's 2 places to get it, right? If you're in the United States, I'd recommend going to my website, Journal Insights, because there I can give you a 10% discount, and it's also free shipping. So put in Mojo, you know why, and you'll get a 10% discount, right? That's Journal Insights. And then the other is
journalinsights.com.
Yes.
Okay.
And I sent you a link too, just in case you want to put it in the show notes.
Mike will put that in the show notes.
I think that's your best option if you're in the States. Or, hey, and if you're just like, no, Steve, you want to use Amazon? It's on Amazon. I know from that first show, I know it's sold In the UK, you can get it, which is great because of local shipping. So check your Amazon if you, I know you got viewers all over the place. If you're not in the US and you can't get it on Amazon, go to the Journal Insights, send me an email, right? And maybe it might make sense if you want to get some guys together or something, and I'll totally work with you. It just postage is crazy. To send something to Canada, this journal, it's $20.
I know.
That's more than the journal. So,
Well,
if you're out of the States and Amazon doesn't have it, you want to get some guys in your club together or something, just reach out and I'll try to work something out with you to make it as reasonable as possible with shipping.
we have a bunch of friends up in Canada, and shipping into Canada is so bad that there are a whole lot of sellers of different things that won't ship to Canada. And so these friends end up buying stuff, shipping it to our house, and then we end up taking it to Canada when we go up for a show.
It's bad, right? When you would send something to Kentucky because it's cheaper and better to do that and wait months to get it.
Yep.
Well, Steve, we look forward to diving into this, and we thank you for being our guest tonight.
Yes, very much so.
Oh, thank you. This has been great. And I can't wait to hear what you come up with when you're journaling.
All right. Well, keep listening. You're going to hear. We're going to address some of these things because Mike and I both found some of the stuff in there really stimulating and fascinating. So
that's great.
We'll see how it develops through the year.
Well, Steve, stay warm in Matamidi.
I'll do my best.
It's not much better down here.
Yeah, really. Not right now because it's still snowing.
All right. Well, you have a good evening.
You take care.
Well, Dave, that was fun. And
yes,
I'm glad Steve agreed to come on and talk about this a little bit. And I hope some folks take advantage of the discount code and pick this up and give it a shot. It's not very expensive. It's probably worth looking into, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree.
But for everybody, we're going to be taking one of these topics in this journal over the next several, or maybe all year. I don't know how long. We're going to take one of these journal topics and add it to our shop talk. So that'll be one question we don't have to think of, Dave.
Yep.
But one we'll have to ponder and offer our insight on to it. We're looking forward to it. Steve was excited to have us do that. And so folks, check it out. We'll put the information in the show notes to get this. He mentioned it in the interview, but you can find that again in the show notes and give it a look.
Bases by Bill is back with quality display bases that enhance any model. From U.S. and Japanese wooden carrier decks to custom-sized cherry hardwood bases, Bases by Bill display bases are available for any type of model and for any size. Oh, and have you heard? Bases by Bill is now a U.S. reseller for One-Man Army high-definition paint masks. These masks bring amazing detail to your model, even maintenance stencils. They have to be seen to be believed. And all One-Man Army products include free shipping. Check basesbybill.com to see the products. Bases by Bill for all your model display needs.
Christian and Bill and the gang up there certainly had their bench busy with some of their new stuff they've been kicking out, which hopefully we'll get to talk to them about in the near future. What's been going on with your bench, Dave?
My bench has been sad, lonely. I have, in the last 2 weeks, I've done a little modeling. I've worked a little bit on the Mooseroo, not nearly as much as I need to, because frankly, I need to get the Mooseroo, I need to get the base model done probably within the next 3 to 4 weeks so that I can work on the vignette portion, which I know what I want to do, but I got to get to it. And I did do some work on the SAM to the point where I am about halfway through some oil paint modulation techniques that I'm working on with Steve Hustad's help. Really, like I said, I've not gotten done nearly enough. And when I've gotten to the bench, many times it's late and I'm exhausted and I've just stared at it. And then made worse by the fact that you are tearing it up. So
They can't blame me.
yeah, tell everybody about how you've been tearing it up. Of course, they've all seen it on the dojo, man.
You got to get busy, dude.
Yeah.
Steve was wondering if you were going to finish that plane of yours for me.
No way. I told him I thought you'd finish first.
Man, but you know my shortcomings.
Yeah, but you got inspired. You really got fired in the last. Well, I would guess since you went on Christmas break.
I think you're right. Dark time didn't get me.
You just got You went the opposite of dark time, baby. You got fired up. I mean, you didn't even let kidney stones bring you down. I mean, that's awesome.
I wouldn't say that. I've had a couple of nights last week. I was like, I better not touch that model right now. I need to figure out, go back and think through my time management, because I don't think I neglected anything during my time off that needed to be done around here. The only thing I didn't get done was the storage stuff I want to get finished in the furnace room, but that's not Bench Top Halftime Report. That was just, I got interrupted by the weather.
Sure.
So back to the bench, my E16 Paul is flirting with completion.
So exactly you could call it complete at this point. What do you have left that you want to do?
There's some exposed metal chipping I want to do.
Okay.
With the Prismacolor. So right now the paint, the final flats on it.
Right.
The canopy masks are off.
What flat did you use?
I use Tester's Dull Coat, thinned about 90%, 10% Dull Coat lacquer to 90% hardware store lacquer thinner.
Okay.
Best.
You didn't use unicorn tears?
No.
Okay.
You don't want to put a paint retarder in your flat coat.
Gotcha.
You might not end up with a flat coat. Though with the much flattening agent as that stuff's got in it, it probably wouldn't matter. But it's it's almost all thinner you're spraying, so
right.
It's like you're almost putting nothing on it, but it's flat. It's really flat.
Yeah.
So that's done. But well, before I did that, I had to go back and I had some handling bumps and bruises. Trailing edge of the wing was a place that had a lot of wear back down to primer. So I had to touch up the topside green on those. Basically, the way I did that is I got a good consistency of my base color mixed with the Tamiya retarder and just moderate brush load and just hit the trailing edge of the wing about the middle of the bristles.
Yeah.
So you don't have the tip riding across the top of the wing or
right
the underside of the wing, and just put another coat of paint on that. And I got all that done. Had a couple of knocks on it that I touched up and a couple places on the Hinamaru with some red. And then once I had all that brush work done, I just flatted it again. And then since then I've got the top side wingtip lights done. I got to flip it over and do the bottoms tomorrow. And then this chipping I want to do. I don't want to do a lot.
Sure.
Looking at photos I can find, most of the carrier-based or ship-based planes were better kept than the ones that were working out of harbors and marinas along the South Pacific. They just, I guess these folks had time on their hands to touch up the paint and whatever, being on a ship, but they just seem to be in a little bit better condition. And at some point, it's I better stop.
Yeah, I hear you.
And after that, I just have to mate it to the catapult.
Well, when you remove the canopy masks, it looks like you had
It was pretty good. There was a piece of debris on the turtle deck, the tapered tail section of the greenhouse, and I don't know what it was or where it came from or when, but I took a toothpick and a chisel tipped the end of it and slid it up in there and at least shoved it out of the way.
Yeah.
And the canopy's, it's the best canopy I've ever done. Is it perfect? No, but it ain't bad.
Canopy masks, man, make all the difference in the world.
The problem is the demarcation of the framing on this old Fujimi canopy was not that great.
You're limited to, it's just like the face on a figure. You can be the best painter in the world, but if the molding is so, there's only so much you can do.
But it came out pretty good. I'm happy with it. So once I get this shipping done, I got to put the propeller on it and then mate it to the catapult, which is, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet. There's no positive
Right.
Again, hit the rewind button. I would have probably fudged a couple of pockets on the bottom fuselage center where the forward two mounting points are.
Right.
On the launch trolley, and then, I don't know.
Pinned it or something.
It'd have been nice to pin the thing on there, to pin it to the plane.
Right.
Before I started painting it. So now I don't have a lot of options. I'm probably going to get it exactly where I want it and then use some extra super thin CA to tack it to the launch trolley.
Yep.
And hope I don't make a mess somewhere. So this book's coming to a conclusion.
Well, good. Now you can get that KV-85 done.
Yeah, which is one I haven't touched over the holidays. Now, I was working on the little flak panzer, the 3D model.
Yeah.
I did on the underside where the rear plate matches the rest of the hull. I added a weld seam out of epoxy putty, and it came out kind of meh. The problem is the groove where those two parts meet isn't very uniform, so you don't get a very nice looking weld seam. So I think what I'm going to do on the hull sides, I'm just going to fill it and give some of those Archer decal weld seams a shot.
Gotcha.
Because I like the way Evans came out on his Panzer too.
I do too.
So, and I've got several sets of those, and might as well use them. It's like a good opportunity because this kit, I'm not striving for. It's paper Panzer, so don't need to get too wrapped around the axle about any of it. That one's shouldn't take long to finish building. There's not a lot to it, so I got to get my printer wash tank refilled with alcohol so I can reprint a few parts. But other than that, that's pretty much my bench. So,
well, good. Can't wait for next episode when you tell us what your next project's going to be.
Yeah, I know. Well, if you got nothing else, I don't either.
That's it.
Plastic Model Mojo is brought to you by Squadron. Head on over to squadron.com for the latest in kits and accessories, all at a great price and with great service. Are you a modeler on the go? Check out the Squadron mobile app for your Apple or Android device for easy shopping from just about anywhere. Squadron, adding to the stash since 1968.
Well, Squadron's prices are pretty good.
Yep. And they ran some sales over the holidays, man.
They did.
They man, they could hurt. Speaking of getting your wallet hurt, Mike, did anything break your wallet over the holidays?
Well, I was going to say, before I realized you lead this segment, was that their prices are pretty good. And if you broke your wallet at Squadron, I'm sure Brandon and Company's happy, but that's all on you, man.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, I've bought a few things.
Okay. Tell me.
Let's go from least interesting to most.
All right.
I bought some new leads for my drafting pencil.
Okay.
Which is a big deal for me.
All right.
I get a lot of use out of my drafting pencil. And I got the Tamiya tape that's got the plastic sheeting already attached to it.
Yep.
Now, I posted on the dojo that I had, I was masking the wingtip lights. There were some plastic shown. Somebody had mentioned I'd use parafilm. That's not what that was. I just made my own plastic and tape masking. So
sure.
Basically what this stuff is, it's Tamiya tape of a certain width, and then overlapped onto some fraction of it is about 6 inches of plastic sheeting.
Right.
So you can get the clean edge with the mask, and then the plastic shields a pretty wide area. Now, the one I got is the one that's about 6 inches wide. They make another one that folds out a couple times, and it's like, I can't remember. I want to say it's about 9 inches or something like that. Maybe a foot.
But you know.
I mean, unless you're building big ships and
not only that, but unless you got your airbrush on blast, you shouldn't be getting overspray more than 6 inches away from the edge you're painting.
Oh, you might be surprised. Generally, that's true, but I got some of that. The coolest thing I got, Dave, is from a Polish company called F&A Miniatures.
Okay.
Not F&A, like the surfers say.
Right.
But F&A Miniatures out of Poland. WZ-34 armored car.
I am interested in that.
Good, because I got two of them.
All right. You are the man.
This company, they're 3D printed models, kits. They're kits. This is a subject I started many years ago. There was a little company called Cerity that kitted one in plastic. It was just awful. Yeah. And then the original Squadron in their Encore line had it too.
Yes.
And I probably got one of those back there on the shelf.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I have the carcass of that project in that box.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is like a fresh start, and I'm anxious to check it out. They sell mostly through their Facebook page, so I'll put this link in the show notes. They don't have a website, but they also make a lot of other Polish equipment that was contemporary to the start of World War II, the September 39 invasion of Poland.
Yeah.
So they've got, it's like I think a staff car and a truck, and they've got an anti-aircraft gun and this armored car, and then the WZ-28, which is an earlier armored car that was still in service then. So if that campaign interests you, you might want to check it out. And then when this kit comes, I'll let everybody know what it's all about. And that's the most exciting thing I've bought. But what about you? You bought anything?
Well, Jim Bates was placing a Hanitz order. And, of course, thinking of his friends, emailed me and said, hey, I'm placing a Hanitz order. Do you want anything? And, of course, I can't resist that. So there was a decal sheet I wanted. So he threw that in. So I've got a decal sheet coming from Hanitz via Jim. Jeff Groves, Inch High, was placing an order with two companies, one White Stork Miniatures, again out of Poland, for some 3D printed figures, and said, hey, I'm placing an order. Do you want stuff? And of course, I went on their website and, yeah, get me this and this and this. So those came in, and we've got to hook up with an Inch so that I can pay him and pick those up from him. He also was placing a decal order and said, hey, do you want any sheets from this company? Of course decals. I can't resist. So I've got some F-4D decals, the 50s Navy jet fighter. I've got some Japanese and British pilots and some civilians from White Stork Miniatures, 3D printed figures. And then, God, I'm not sure what the decal sheet I ordered with Jim was, but he'll remind me when he listens to this episode. And then the big thing I got, which was kind of modeling adjacent, is I ordered a laser printer, color laser printer, which I really ordered because I needed it for, actual use, but it does have some possible modeling applications, and we'll see down the road if this laser printer gets put to some modeling use.
Well, I hope so.
I do too. So that's it.
Well, we didn't do too bad.
No, we didn't. Mike, we're at the end of the episode. I'm at the bottom of my modeling fluid glass. How was your modeling fluid? Well, Russell's. It can't be bad.
Not bad. And I think I'm still batting 1,000 for listeners who've tried it.
Yep. Well, that's one that you recommend that you really can't go wrong with.
No, it's pretty good stuff. What about yours?
This stuff is good. I will tell you. Now, it's 93 proof, so 46.5% alcohol by volume. And there is a little bit of heat at the end of the sip, where you with hotter bourbons, you tend to get that. But it's beautifully smooth, and the sherry comes through, but very, very subtly. If you didn't know that it was finished in sherry casks, I'm not sure you could say that that's what you were tasting, but it's there, and it really smooths out the sip. This is great. I enjoy it. I'll be nursing it slowly to try and keep it alive as long as humanly possible.
Well, What do they call it on the bottle?
They call it Rabbit Hole Dareringer Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey finished in PX sherry casks. What they do is they obviously, in order to make it a bourbon, they have to first age it in charred white oak. Never use charred white oak barrels.
Well, that's where I was going. Does the finish change its liquor designation?
No, it does not. As long as it is initially aged in charred white, never use charred white oak barrels, it's a bourbon. You can then re-barrel it in any barrel you want, and it's still bourbon. You couldn't age it completely in the sherry casks and call it bourbon. Mike, we're at the end of the episode. Do you have some shout-outs?
I do. And like I always do, Dave, I'm going to shout out our most recent contributors to the show, one of which was our guest, Steve Anderson's a new patron, Ted Pendergrass, David Roach, Jeremy Peterson, and Steve Cherazowitz have all chosen to support Plastic Model Mojo financially, and we really appreciate it. And right now is as good a time as any, folks. We are rolling out a new website, and all these funds are being put to good use to make that a reality. And then once it gets all launched, we're going to move on to a phase 2, and all this is going to help bring phase 2 to reality. So thanks, guys, for contributing to the show. It means a lot. And, all of those folks out there who are contributing to Plastic Model Mojo. It's really, really humbling, and it's been a big help, especially in 2024 going into 2025.
Well, I'd like to shout those people out too. Thank you very much. We really do appreciate it. We're plowing the money back into the podcast, the website, everything, and we couldn't do this without you. So thank you very much. Additionally, I'd like to shout out both Jim Bates and Jeff Groves, who were kind enough when they were placing orders with different model vendors to text me or email me and say, hey, do you want something? That's always a way to get me to spend money, but it is also very, very kind to think of me when you're doing something like that. So Jim and Jeff are both very good friends, and I really appreciate them doing that.
Well, Dave, that is the end of the episode.
Yes, it is. First one of 2025's in the books.
There we go. So as we always say,
so many kids.
So little time, Dave, and see you soon.
See you soon, Mike.